everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio. Today I'm sharing with you some more stencil techniques. I am doing the 100 Days of StencilGirl, and that is my 100 Days project this year. Last year I did mixed media abstracts on canvas mostly. This year I'm just doing the stencils. I have lots and lots and lots of StencilGirl stencils as well as lots of other companies. And so this is a way for me to get a big collection of painty papers to use in my collage work and play along with a bunch of other people who are using the hashtag 100 Days of StencilGirl. So you can go out and look for that. But what I'm doing today is using watercolor, water-soluble media on a few different types of paper with stencils. And people might not think about doing this. There is, of course, the concept that these things are not permanent for mixed media. You need to seal them. With watercolor, you need to seal it before you start putting a bunch of matte medium and stuff because it'll smear around. But the effect is so cool that you just kind of want to do it anyway. So the first type of paper here that I have is this package of vellum paper. Now, my experience in the past with vellum paper has been that it's brittle and that if you get it wet, it wrinkles and it won't unwrinkle and it might even crack. But this particular vellum, which I got the heads up on this from Mary Beth Shaw from StencilGirl Products, it works really well with watercolor. So I have a bunch of watercolor palettes out here. I've got my Schminky super granulating watercolors. I've got my Starlight palette. I've got my Sumi ink palette. And then I have this assorted watercolor palette that has all different types of more higher end watercolors. And I'm simply taking the vellum paper, or, well, now I've got out, I haven't even explained, and I've already got other paper, but I have this other thing. It's like a sample pack of Soho papers, and there was marker paper and tracing paper. I don't know, it's 4 different type of papers in there, so I decided to try those as well. They're just small pieces, probably 2.5 by 3.5 maybe, and I'm trying them as well. But the process is to put some watercolor and water. I usually just spray with a spray bottle the piece of paper. Put some loose watercolor on there with a brush, making it sloppy, lots of water, and then laying the stencil over the top. Sometimes I just leave it like that because something about the Mylar and the stencil seems to make patterns, make the water pool in certain ways. Sometimes I put more color over the top, or else I might pat some of the color out using, a baby wipe or something like I just did there. Now that was on tracing paper. That's the only one that I used with the tracing paper. I didn't like it. It became brittle, like I was talking about with other types of vellum earlier. It's weird. Didn't like it with water, but the marker paper that was in this pack worked really great. And I know there is marker paper that you can buy at some dollar stores here in the United States. I don't know if you can buy it at pound stores or not, but those type of inexpensive stores. And it's in the kids section, kids craft section, called marker paper. And it's probably, it works really great with watercolor too, because I've seen Mary Beth Shaw do it in her live streams, but I've never bought any yet. But it might be similar to that marker paper I was using from Soho, in those little sample pack. So you can see the stencil makes a pattern, and it makes the water and the pigment separate out somehow. You do need to set it aside to dry. Now, it would be best if you set it aside to dry and let it completely dry and then take the stencil off, right? We all know that. You also know that I'm an extremely impatient person. And so I did use my heat tool to dry some of these up just because I wanted to see the effect. And as long as you don't hold the heat tool in one place and really hold it for a long time, it really won't do anything to the Mylar of these particular stencils. They don't really melt or anything. So you know, use caution because you don't want to melt your stencils. You paid money for that. But um, I did, some of them I took it, I did set them aside. You saw me do that. Some of them I set aside, but they weren't completely dry when I brought them back, you know, back out. And I pulled off the stencil and dried it, or else later in the video you'll see I just turned it over on the other side and kind of gave it a little bit of drying while it was still on the stencil, because the water on the paper attracts to the mylar and they stick together. Not permanently, but they stick enough that you can kind of move the stencil around and set it, you know, you can lift it up, set it to the side on your desk to let it dry. So I think if you're going to try this, maybe you might want to let it dry naturally and see what happens. But for me, I'm impatient. I wanted them to be done already. So I did use the heat tool. So as you can see, this little pack of vellum, it's only like maybe, I don't know, these pages are probably maybe 3 by 4. I think that there are packs of larger pieces of this, and I will put a link below the video down there. It'll say materials and links, and there'll be a link to this vellum paper pack on Amazon. That's where I got it because Mary Beth Shaw recommended it and showed it on her live stream. And I said, vellum doesn't work with watercolor. What's she talking about? So then, of course, I had to try it because, yeah, and it did. So it is this particular vellum, not necessarily all vellum, because I still have other pieces of vellum. And I know they don't work because I've used them for years with stamping projects. And if you get them wet, they get brittle. They curl up. They get weird. So that's just, you know, what I'm going to say. This vellum works. I don't know what the difference is. I don't know, like it's made out of something different, has a different coating. I don't know. Also, this marker paper works really well. I did it some more with these little pieces of marker paper from this tiny little thing. That's like kind of a sample packet. This time I'm just I'm absorbing the watercolor with that marker paper right off the stencil. So those two on the right are from the same time that I used it. And the longer you leave it, the better it looks. Like this one is really cool. That one had a chance to dry a little bit more before I started messing with it. Also, you know, depending on what colors you use, what you like, your different colors. I can't really say that the watercolor palettes made a difference, other than, of course, one of them is shimmery, so you're going to get shimmer. And some of these are granulating, so you get granulation, right? But I was just having fun messing with it. It's not about the watercolor palettes. It's about the process of putting the mylar on there. And you can see that this stencil is extremely dirty. It's got layers of acrylic paint on it. Still worked. I don't think it has to be a clean stencil. You know, you might think, well, if you're interacting with mylar, then you would want a clean stencil where you could actually, where the mylar is actually touching the watercolor. Didn't seem to make a difference. So, yeah, this is the technique. Put some water on there, put some watercolor, swish it around, get a couple different colors, get it wet, put the stencil on top, let it dry. Maybe go over the top of it with some other color if you want to. Don't have to. Maybe absorb some of the wet watercolor through the stencil with some type of absorbent towel or something. If you want to, you don't have to. It does its thing regardless. So set it aside to dry. I was having a little trouble picking that one up. Because it was really wet. Like if the paper's super wet, it might want to separate when you pick it up. It might want to stay, especially because the paper underneath the paper, I had some deli paper underneath, and it was wanting to, you know, suck up to the paper more than the stencil, because the paper just kept getting wetter and wetter and wetter, and I kept drying it off, but it's still very wet underneath. So water attracts water. You know, that's just the way it is. Same thing's going to happen with this one. This one turned out really cool, and I'm not sure why. It had a lot more defined pattern. I think that maybe how fat the lines are on the stencil makes a difference, how big the openings are on the stencil, and you can just experiment with, all that. So it's fun. Now, if I wanted to use these in mixed media, which I do, if I wanted to make them into collage paper, I either need to be really super careful when I'm gluing them down, or else I could take either a gel plate and some matte medium and cover the matte medium over the gel plate and then press these down into it to seal it. Or I could use a brayer and some clear gesso or matte medium and brayer over the top of it. When you brayer over the top of it, you just need to give it one pass, one pass, one pass, not back and forth, or you'll start muddying up your watercolor. But if I do that with these, then they will be sealed and I no longer have to be concerned about what I do with them. I can, put them on whatever I want, use whatever mediums I want. So that's a consideration. How much trouble do you want to go to? But I think that the result of this, dreamy, watery color, but still has pattern, but dreamy, watery color over here and pattern over here is really cool. And so I would think that you might want to do this, even if you are a collage mixed media artist like me. These still would be really super fun to use because they're different than anything else that you might have. They're different than acrylic. They're different than alcohol ink. They're different than, any other method that you might use with your stencils. So that's what I'm saying about it. This stencil, I didn't like it as much with this process. Still kind of cool, but meh, didn't really like it. So, it's all about how much space is open, how fat the lines are, how much closed space there is. So then I was thinking about that issue with them needing to be sealed. So I said, well, why don't I try using inktense blocks and inktense pencils? Because these are water soluble media. You activate them with water. However, once they're dry, if you've properly activated them, once they're dry, they don't move anymore. So I decided that I would, do a few things. And this is using the blocks. There's some inktense blocks. So I decided to just do like some stencil rubbing. I think I have a different video and I'll put it up in the iCard. If you hover over the screen, you'll see that there's like a recommendation iCard thing there of another video that I did using all different types of things to do stencil rubbing. So wetting the paper, putting the stencil underneath. In this case, I put some color on the paper that was wet, and then I put the stencil underneath and went over the top. And that's with inktense blocks. They don't have any paint around them, so you can just use them right on there. And then I decided what could I do with the pencils. And one thing that you can do with watercolor pencils or inktense pencils or even pens is to use the stencil as a template and to draw around the shapes. So that's kind of almost a different technique than what I'm doing here. But I'm still using water-soluble media, so I kept it on this video because I didn't do it very much because I'm impatient. But it looks kind of cool. Then if you get it wet, the lines start to, feather out like a watercolor. And then I went back in with a brush and just used my blocks, my inktense blocks, as kind of a palette and picked up some of those colors and just, filled in with that. So you're getting kind of a feathered, watery look, but it's more defined because you did it with a pencil. And because I activated it with water, I even spritzed it with water, this will be a lot more permanent if I put it on with other wet media. So it's all dry, it's permanent, set, because that's what inktense pencils do, which is very different. So then this time I thought, what could I do to combine different things? So I picked up the stencil, I put the paper on top of it, spritzed it with water, did a little bit of that stencil rubbing with the blocks, and then I went back in. I put the stencil on top of it, on the same pattern. So the pattern's still there. There's a little bit of smooshy color from the rubbing, and then I did the thing with the pencils, using different pencils, going around the shapes, drawing around the shapes, and activating that with water as well. So just another thing you can do, combining the blocks and the pencils. Gives you a different look. And that's what we're doing here. We're trying to get all different types of collage fodder paper, painty paper in all different styles, all different techniques, so that we can use them later in our collage and mixed media work. So see, that one's different too. I spritzed it after. I didn't go in with a brush and try to smear it. I just spritzed it with water, with my water sprayer. So this is the last one. I did the same thing, only this is on deli paper that's craft colored. So of course the papers are going to come out darker because it's on a darker piece of paper. So I hope you guys are enjoying this video and the techniques, and you know, thinking about stencil techniques through the 100 days of StencilGirl. I did miss a few days because I had some personal issues I had to deal with, but I'm back. I've got more stenciled paper for you for the rest of however many 100 days there are. I don't even know. Probably another 50, I'm guessing. So that's what I'm doing. So blue stencil rubbing with the block, came back in, put the stencil on top, went with the pencils around the shapes, and then kind of this time I kind of blended them as they were on the paper still with just water on the brush. So that's it for me. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up, leave a comment or question below if you have one. You can subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I have lots and lots and lots and lots of videos, just so many, all about mixed media, collage, paper painting, and then all other things that I get interested in, but mostly that, but a lot of other stuff, making small art, making canvas art, you know, making paper dolls, all kinds of stuff. So subscribe, check out all the content on my channel. I've got links below. You can use those. I have a membership to my channel if you would like to get exclusive real-time content on the 15th of every month. You can join. If you're on an app, you're going to need to go to the computer and join that way. So that's it for me for today. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.